Not going to go into much bio. Come and ask me for things afterwards. My name is Patrick Curtney. This idea of using the word ignorance is kind of clickbait in that sense, but for the longest time, when people ask me what's my favorite thing, I would say not knowing things, being ignorant, walking into situations where I don't know what's going on, ignorance. And I'd say ignorant, the power of ignorance. I'd say ignorance is my drug, or all kinds of different silly things you say about it. But it applies to us in software in some surprising ways. So what I'm hoping, I'll get to that in a minute, but what I'm hoping to do is give you this idea and illustrate in a way that makes you go, oh, right, I get that. Then talk about more applications to what you guys do and what we all do in software. But I have an actual motive that says this matters in some ways beyond what you do in software. So I hope that carries away with you also. So when I was a kid, my dad was insanely smart. Go into a lot of biographical detail there too. And we would say stupid shit like, Dad, that guy's really ignorant. And my dad, being real specific about language, would say, that's not ignorance. Ignorance just means you don't know something. So if that guy doesn't know something, that's not an insult. What's wrong with that? Not knowing something is never a bad thing. And then you could talk to 5- and 6-year-old kids, and now they want to say stupid instead of ignorant, and that's fine. But the idea that ignorance is a good thing kind of got into my head. And so as we go through software, so much of what we do is all about the stuff we know. You spend all this time in college learning programming languages and theory and programming around architecture and how you build stuff. You're piling knowledge into your head. So what I hope you take away from this, one big idea, I hope that comes across pretty clearly and you go, oh, I get that. You're probably going to get a sense of my passion and excitement about all the things I don't know and how that ends up looking. I want to map that to curiosity and a culture of learning. I'm going to drop a lot of phrases. I'll probably put up a bunch of links on the meetup group after this. I didn't want to clutter them all into the slides and make that take too long. My teams know it's pretty much required that you keep some kind of a writing instrument in front of you because I'm going to drop a lot of stuff you might want to go learn about. But here I tried to make it just phrases that you go, oh, if I Google culture of learning or knowledge capital or fluency, you'll find references to all the things I'm talking about. Can everybody hear me okay? And B, am I blowing the front row away? Don't want to scream at anybody. Okay, and then how most of software development can be viewed as learning activity. Most of what we do in software teams, from product owners to developers to everybody, you're always in a constant learning activity. That's what you're doing. And I hope I give you a bunch of examples. Yvonne was really good playing editor with me to try and make sure, okay, let's give some specifics that you guys can take away. And as I started gathering those specifics, I came up with like 20s and 30s. I got lots of these things. So I'm going to hit a few of them real quick, find out if they're relevant. And I hope to do this in enough time to leave time for questions and let you guys start playing with this idea and ask questions about, well, would it work with this way? Or would it work that way? Okay? Good so far? Okay. I have a happy toy. There's a great app by Paper, 53 called Paper on my iPad. So I make drawings in there. So I was trying to, about 10 years back, as I was going through some of these changes in software and in technology and in my role in companies, I started getting this thing in my head of trying to figure out how do I visualize this thing I'm feeling that just drives me nuts, but it's kind of how things work. And after I kind of worked it out a while, I ended up having this in my head. So I'm going to play through this really quick. If I could make an animation out of it someday, that'd be great. That'd be better. Imagine that the stuff in the center is stuff you know, ideas, knowledge you've acquired, right? And the line outside is that surface area. It's the stuff that encompasses that, right? And imagine that the stuff that isn't in here, that surface area is where your awareness is of all the things you don't know. Out here is stuff you don't even know that you don't know yet. And there's a stupid American thing with Rumsfeld talking about unknown unknowns and bullshit about that. But the idea is valid, that there's stuff you don't know that you haven't encountered yet, right? And then there's stuff that, and I'll show a picture of this later, but I love this idea. This is a wiki page you went to and read one day, and suddenly you knew all the other things you wanted to link to and go find, right? So think of the interconnections that pop in as that surface area, right? And then you acquire more knowledge. You've gone off and you've read that stuff. Now you know about more stuff out there. I started thinking about equations in my head about encompassing an area, the amount of knowledge I have, the surface area of the stuff that I'm touching, right? It's pseudo math, but it entertained me. Got me thinking about how much we're always adding to that big stack of stuff we know, right? So there's more. And then this is that thing that you do where you go and you read about something that somebody mentioned, even in the panel. And by the way, love the panels. I love that they set up that format because every company we go to that sponsors this, we get to learn all about how they build software. And sorry, quick departure from all this. Thanks for all this data. I'm going to refer to a couple things in it. One of the things I wanted to know is how many people here are leading teams now? So for all of you guys leading teams, how many of you got something that you hadn't heard before about how they run their team and now you know it? How many picked up something? Yeah, anything at all. You pick up a new link, you pick up a new idea, boom. Now you've got more stuff to go dig in. That happens to me all the time. Okay, so you continue the process, you acquire more knowledge, see how much that is, and there's always more out there, right? There's always stuff you don't know. Okay, so now you acquire that knowledge too, and your knowledge is huge. You've got all this stuff in your brain. You're able to do enormous amounts of stuff. Maybe you've been programming a year, 2 years, 5 years, 8, 10. That's what the years up there is about. The thing you need to know, and this is, again, applying silly math to things, but it is something that it triggered me. The amount of knowledge you gain is that area. It's just the growth of area in a circle, volume in a sphere, and the surface of the sphere. The stuff inside grows really fast. The surface area is slower. It's a shallower growth. That's all. Think of that as the scarcity problem, right? The people who can acquire new knowledge, that's great. The people who can know that there's more to learn and are eager and curious and going off and finding it, that's more valuable. So the more I learn, the more I know that I don't know, right? And I thought 10 years ago, dude, this is a great idea. I really love this. And I actually had ideas back then that I wanted to turn it into some kind of talk. And I thought this was really clever of me. And then I went off and looked, and no, this idea has been thought of before. You know, people know this already. Okay, so take all that. Like I said, I want to get one big idea to you, and then start talking about places to use it. So this is going to go pretty quick. So we're going to apply it to software. This is me thinking about other stuff that just interests me. Grew up in the States. The stones on the streets in Amsterdam are older than my country. We don't have a lot of really cool old history to kind of acquire. So I'm interested in all that stuff. Things you guys walk by every day. Cathedrals is one of the things that I got super excited about. There was a book I read, Ken Follett, Pillars of the Earth, really cool. This is Salisbury Cathedral. That's the cathedral that he modeled it on. Just a month ago, for a vacation, I actually went to England to go wander around and see references to stuff. Just because I wanted to see it. I didn't know. I want to go find something out. I don't know. If you go to Salisbury, you can actually get a tour up inside the cathedral. Now, I'm not talking about this from a religious standpoint. I'm thinking societal and buildings and cultures and all that stuff. You get up inside there and you find out the timbers that they carve that hold up the roof, we get lumber. It's dimensional lumber. It's legs. It's straight. It's lines, right? They cut down trees, cut them lengthwise, several boards, and then they put them up. Whatever curve that was, ding, 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 down the roof. They just used the tree. I never knew that. That's the kind of stuff that I get something out of that. I get a lot of joy out of that moment. The minute something new happens, I didn't know it before, now I know it. How many of you guys, okay, this is a sillier question. I think I can see from the room. Not a lot of you are parents. Some of you are kids. You ever see that moment when you toss a baby into the water, or you're there to catch them, I hope. But all that stuff where you teach kids to swim. They teach babies to swim by just throwing them in the water. They actually survive. They do just fine. They knew it naturally. But if you watch the kid make that jump, the instant they're going toward the water, their whole face lights up and they go, you can replicate that trick with babies. Somebody hands you a baby or an uncle or something, and somebody hands you a baby, puff air in their face and watch them just go, and they'll just laugh. That's that aha moment. It's so exciting. I get that feeling when I learn shit like this. Okay, another example just to give you one more that's fun. I was hearing all this stuff about meditation and science, medicine, all that kind of thing, before I did any of it. And they were seeing all these actual replicable results from people meditating connected to physical problems. Well, then you go researching that and you find out the Buddhists have been doing this forever. And I thought, oh, okay, well, yeah, Eastern religions, I kind of get this. I came to find out, I come from more of a Christian heritage early in my life. I come to find out the Jesuits have been doing this just as long. Well, yeah, different story there. But you didn't, how many of you knew that Jesuits practiced meditation and breathing? New thing. Okay, that stuff all interests me. Okay, now, you guys, knowledge capital. How many have heard that phrase? Knowledge capital. Cool idea, makes us valuable. Somebody's wondering about the value of software companies. The knowledge in all your heads, that's actual capital. That's money in the bank. The company you're working for, domain knowledge and skills knowledge, that's what makes you valuable. That's why we do what we do. A talk about 15 years ago, KPMG was going around to everybody they consulted for, telling people most of the value of your company in a technology company walks out the door every night at the end of the day. There's nothing you can do about it. They don't come back the next day, you don't have a company. Knowledge capital. Okay, bust through a story of me now. Started out in software in C++. This is why I was asking about languages. Started out in C++. If you haven't seen this, the Smalltalk postcard, the entire definition of the language fits right here. Pretty cool. Okay, so I got into Smalltalk, and I was doing that at a company where I had to build stuff with it and help other people build stuff with it. Along the way in that, I ended up getting into a research group that was building something called Self. How many have heard of Self? You all use stuff connected to it. I'll show you that in a minute. So Self was instance-based, object-oriented programming. So they went from Smalltalk and this beautiful environment to doing stuff with instances. Okay, I was like, that is the coolest thing. I want to find ways to apply this. So I picked up fluency in Smalltalk, and then Self, and then Apple came out with this thing, and one of the original authors of the Self programming language went to work at Apple, and they implemented that as the language for the Newton. And I was so excited. How many mobile developers, iOS developers? Maybe a couple of you. I was super excited about mobile before there was many people doing mobile. You weren't carrying things that could do smart stuff in your phone, in your pocket yet. So I was super excited about this, built a whole bunch of software in it for about 4 years. Everything, I knew literally everything you could talk about this. I'd give classes, other developers would pick it up, build software with it. So Newton. Anybody have a Newton now? Has anyone ever seen an Apple Newton? Right. Okay. Steve Jobs, 1998, kills the Newton. Just ends the project. Just says, yeah, we're not going to keep doing this. So all the software companies that built up to build stuff with this thing just went. And just to visualize, what went through my head is if knowledge can lose value, if the stuff that I put all this time into learning, there's a great big void, right? I learned stuff. It's useless. Has no value at all. No application at all. Okay. Pull this back. I'll get to this one in a second. You're writing React now. And somebody said Cordova, Symfony, all these technologies. This won't be what you're writing in 5 years. Right? So acquiring the knowledge, having the knowledge, filling your head with it and being the smartest guy in the room isn't the value. As a team lead and as a manager, we often start with the feeling that we need to know stuff. Our team's not going to have value in us if we don't have answers when they ask questions. But that's not really the valuable part. You not knowing something, ignorance, creates space for your team. So not knowing things is actually valuable. Okay. All that's pretty theoretical, right? Anybody not clear on what it is I'm describing? Not knowing things, knowledge capital, build value. We know stuff. Clear so far? Okay. So let me take an example of the not knowing stuff thing. Dark Horse Comics makes a bunch of cool stuff. I work there with a guy. And in our Agile team, XP team, 10 people writing code, product manager, a couple other people helping out, DevOps, Django Python backend, iOS, Java, Android development, and other scripting. Pure XP, the whole team takes the next thing off the queue, backlog, pivotal, and does that thing. Whatever it is, each person does those things. So it was a wonderful environment for learning. You're all going to do everything. If you don't know iOS, you're still going to do it. But when it came to deciding how we're going to build things, we would gather in a group, whatever it is. We were talking about architecting and getting people involved in the architecting of your systems. When we would all gather around, Lennon has a history at Sun and early Ruby days and all that stuff. Easily one of the smartest people you'll ever meet. And a bunch of you guys, I hope, feel like you're one of the smartest people around. In any discussion, anything we were going to think about building, nobody would speak up. Because at the end of the conversation, you always knew Lennon was going to have the answer. So you're thinking through this architecture, that architecture, this problem, this thing you're trying to fix. And as everybody's kind of talking through ideas, all the conversation stops when Lennon's involved because I just want to hear what he's going to do because that's going to be the smartest idea. What does that do to the team? Just sucks all the air right out of the conversation because nobody else is popping ideas in. Lennon moved on, went to Twitter, data science, did a whole bunch of cool stuff. The people left behind who had been doing all these multidisciplinary things suddenly start putting ideas forward. Some of those ideas are wildly smart, and some of the biggest innovations I saw out of the team came after Lennon goes away. So the smartest guy in the room, pulled out of the room, creates that gap. Ignorance. We don't know what he knows. But now creativity comes in and people start thinking of things that we wouldn't have thought of, we wouldn't have spoken up if he was still there. So, what can you do in your teams? Everybody think about this much? Bus factor? Constant? Who's the bus factor in their team? Yvonne has to admit. Although he's doing the coolest stuff I could tell you about in a second for fixing this. But yes, you have bus factors on your company, bus factors in your team. Bus factor 1, bus factor 2, not too many people know something. Here's one trick to take away right now. Have you ever heard this idea? Let the least knowledgeable person on your team, even these little teams of 3, pick up the next task. So when you guys are figuring out who's going to do what in a particular iteration, the person who knows that topic least picks it up, and a different guy knows something else less, let them pick the other thing up. It doesn't mean they do it without help, but if you constantly take on the cost in your company, in your team, to velocity of how fast you're going to produce it, of letting that least knowledgeable person pick something up, you reduce the bus factor. Ask Yvonne later. I'll just reference one thing you could be doing, and I don't want to take time now to tell you. He's actually got an exercise for retrospectives and for plannings to fix this as well, and to get a measurement of what that looks like in your team. Really, really cool. Okay, another application. You don't know what your users know. How many of you guys have engineering teams where somebody says, we need to feature something like this, and they just run off and they can do it? They just assume that they know how this should go. That happen? Use something else. This is one cool way. How many of you guys are familiar with Lean Startup Principles? Cool. How many of you guys use that scientific language, experiment language, in your discussions of features? That's awesome. Everybody that can do it, awesome. But it doesn't happen near often enough. It ought to be something we always do. What's the next feature we should build? We don't know. That's the line I would want you to take away from this section. You don't know. You can find out. You have to think of an experiment that would prove it. Go do whatever you need to make that thing live and show it to people. Get the feedback, and then find out what else is going on. Okay? Another one. This one came up when I was talking to a couple of people earlier. And again, this is a topic I'd love to talk to anybody about afterwards if they want to. When you look at your individual teams, so take a second, since we got a couple minutes here. Is it too much teacher-like to say close your eyes?
Yeah, it is.
Too teacher. Okay, never mind.
Too much.
Think about your team. Think about the group of people that you're actually coding with now. Or if you're in leadership, the people that you're responsible for. Okay? Think about them for a second and go, what have they done to improve in the last 3 months? Can you visualize something specific that is better than it was? If you can, cool. Lots of folks answer that with, I don't know, or no. Nothing's better, we're just doing stuff. We're too busy, we got stuff going on, we're trying, we just keep doing it. You might be practicing retrospectives. Let me drop this on you. If what happens because you're doing retrospectives doesn't produce that same scientific method experiment, you're doing it wrong. Change. Because you literally have the opportunity every time you hit a retrospective and look back at something to go, did everything go perfect? What didn't go well? Of the things that didn't go well, what's a thing that might make that better? Name drop another thing. This will be fun. Agile is connected to extreme programming. Not everybody still reads the extreme programming books. The XP Wiki is a great source of a lot of this stuff. And a lot of the phrases you can be using with your teams come from there. This is one of them. A core idea of Agile and XP was the simplest thing that might work. It applies to code, it applies to tests, it applies to retrospectives. So this scientific method thing, come up with the simplest thing that might fix what you guys identified wasn't great and actually apply it. Put it on a whiteboard, put it on a wall, remind each other every day at stand-up we were going to try and make progress on this. Is that experiment working? Is anything better? Keep doing it until you do your next retro. And then come up with the next thing. Okay. Depending on your companies, and you guys have product owners, others have product managers, some people just have a project manager telling them what to do. Who knows? If the incoming stream from outside the coders feels like it's just orders you're being given, tasks with no rationale and no real definition behind them, adopt curiosity as an attitude. Doesn't mean you're mean, just question every single thing. We think we need to add this button to this screen before they log in. Why is that? What do you hope is going to come out of that? Back to the experiments. How are you going to know if that's going to actually making anything better? Be curious. Dig into all that stuff. And all of that, this curiosity as an attitude, starts with saying, we don't know. That's why we're asking. Literally everything about it starts there. Here's another fun thing. If you take on this idea that we always don't know enough. Ignorance is your power. That lack of knowledge is the whole endeavor. The stuff we build is stuff that nobody's built before. If that already exists, you should be buying it. Everybody has that mantra built into software development generally, right? Okay. If it exists, go get it. If not, it's way too expensive to build it. Look at what it ends up actually taking to build something. Don't build it. Don't ever fucking build it. Oh, it doesn't exist. We need to build it. Okay. Now we have to do it. Well, you're building something that doesn't exist. You have to learn how to build it. If you just start with assuming you already know, then you're probably not going to build what's going to serve the user that you're building it for. So this curiosity as an attitude and always knowing that you don't know enough gives you everything you need. Deep breath. Okay, so that was everything I had for you. One of my mentors does it this way. At the start of a retrospective, or at the start of a discovery, or the start of a kickoff, you start out by saying, this group of people, what do you hope to get? Because I'm doing it in the format of a talk, I told you what I hope you get. But then the cool thing to do at the end of your meeting, at the end of the session you spend with your people, is go back to that sheet that says, this is what you said you hoped you get. How did we do? Did we get you the things we hoped? If you haven't done that before, that's a fun idea. Did you get the one big idea? Yeah? Some sense of a curiosity and a culture of learning, that those things end up being part of software. Kind of the learning activity nature of software, you're always exploring and asking people to teach you something that you don't know. And then some examples that you guys can put into your teams. Did we hit all that somewhat? Okay. I think we got time for questions. Do we? A little bit?
Yeah, we do.
Okay. Anything anybody wants to know about this stuff, I just blurted it all out there. I like conversations more than I like speeches. Yeah. Yeah, man.
Yeah, so about the driven data development, also kind of A/B testing stuff, or be more like putting metrics everywhere. I have a fear that sometimes this leads to kind of local maximum. So you can kind of test things, and then you cannot move like literally getting much more users, or like building much better product if you just don't change your whole product. Like, what do you think about it?
Exactly right. You need to take actual data and go looking for finding out, am I trapped in the local maximum?
Okay.
Yeah. Everybody know the metaphor of local maximums and global maximums? Local maxes, global maxes. Local maxes, I see there's a peak in front of me. I'm going to climb that peak. And when I climb that peak, I know what I need to know. And then you get to the top of the peak and you find out, shit, there's 7 other mountains taller than this one. But you didn't know that because you're down at the bottom of this mountain. So you wrongly think, this is what I have to conquer. That's local maximum versus global maximum. So yeah, data is one good way to find out before you climb that thing whether this is the thing to worry about. And you can't really know until you know. So that is part of the fun for me. Is that addressing what you're talking about? I don't. How do you do this?
Yeah, I mean, I just don't know. That's why I'm asking.
I think the difficult thing in this sense, and I'm facing this question as well, like how long do we have to change the color of the button instead of just rebuilding the whole website, right? I think there's a place where like data-driven is not a substitute for strategy and for like using a brain every once in a while. And I think we, just as any religion, I think we're kind of pushing into that data-drivenness a bit too much. But where to find the balance?
No.
I guess I missed your question, and the question I think you really mean is, I'm asking a question, I'm gathering data. Am I asking the right question? And yes, that's a crazy hard fucking question. Yeah, knowing whether or not you're doing that. And the only close answer I can give you at all is go ask a lot of questions. And I guess the better one that would be real specific is know your audience. Are you building this for somebody? Okay, do you have the right somebody? And are you looking at the right markets? Are you asking the right people? And then also, I guess an obvious thing, I think a lot of you guys do this, don't ask questions sometimes. Get somebody in and ask them to just narrate and see what you learn from that, because that might give you new questions. That's a fun one. Yeah?
Yeah, so do you feel like this stuff kind of plays out a little differently for distributed teams? I feel like there's an element here where like having people in front of you like makes a big difference.
Oh yeah. It's definitely part of it. And you guys were talking about using wikis versus people talking in person. The Xerox mechanics, Xerox repairman story is really fun for kind of learning about that water cooler conversations versus documentation. Go read about that. It's a great story. Having people to talk to definitely helps and fixes that. But learning to do it remote when that's how your culture works is going to be really important. I'll give myself a pass and say, yes, that's interesting and hard. And I have done it, and I've done it with 120 people spread all over the globe working in teams. And it can be done. And you can build a culture of people that really do share that data and share that information. The least qualified works thing can happen that way too. The really surprising thing is if you actually use multi-screen, live video, remote pairing. Yeah, that's a big ask. It's not easy and it's draining, but it'll share that knowledge really well. Somebody back there, you were asking.
One question. Coming back to the topic of ignorance a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Your picture with Autodot going in all directions is a little bit of impressive because it means you are just so open-minded that you're overflowing yourself. That's my point of view. So I, for myself, and maybe you share your point of view, a little bit of ignorance, from my perspective, could be healthy for me for not losing my goal.
Yeah. No. You're saying exactly the right thing. If you have a real narrow focus to something that you're trying to accomplish and achieve, think of your juniors. Your junior developers are picking up the language. One of the big mistakes we often make is trying to give them 70 things to learn instead of 2. Somebody's we expect them to be full stack developers. They're brand new to Ruby. They're brand new to PHP. They're coding this thing, and they also need to code the front end for it. And then they're learning JavaScript, and then they're learning React, and then they're trying to figure out Redux while they're trying to figure out services. Too much. So focus is really good for learning. And sometimes you want to just drive a laser down acquiring all the knowledge around one thing. Yeah, absolutely. That definitely works. But yeah, you pick which thing you're going to do. Yep.
Right. So probably the most fascinating thing that you were talking about today was that gap between how fast we learn things that we don't know, but we know that we don't know, and the things that we don't know that we don't know. Like
Sure.
Those two curves. But so question is, how does that correlate with how people actually learn? Because imagine we're consuming some sort of information, some source of information, book for an example, and author is explaining some things. Okay, we start to understand some things, but he's also mentioning lots of things which he doesn't necessarily immediately explain, but you realize they exist, they're not explained to you, so theoretically then your horizon of not knowing should be expanding faster,
I think you're exactly right, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the same thing, indeed.
That's exactly right.
Kind of the volume is actually volume expands more than surface when you increase the radius, basically. So I have the feeling that actually the amount you don't know increases more with the amount you know than the amount that you don't know that you know that.
Okay.
The number of bookmarks expands faster than the number of pages I visit.
There you go.
Yes.
Actually, I'll admit this. One of the reasons, and I got some feedback, is like, yeah, don't even show those slides. That kind of just is fuzzy nonsense. It distracts. What I was trying to visualize in my head is much cooler, and that's the best I can do, drawing something. But you're right. There's some penumbra, some radar echo distance from your boundaries that visualizes what I'm really thinking of, which is, like you said, as you read more and more, you find out all these things, and you go, wow, I never even knew about that. What, do I want to come back to that? Am I going to research it? And part of what makes this really fun for me, and where is, I'm trying to find person, when asked, how do you find this stuff out? The answer, it was one of the panel, and I'm forgetting his name, my apologies. Um,
Yep.
yeah, the only one who's not you two.
Then again.
Is he here? Thank you. There's the face. Yeah. It was like google.com. Yeah. Dude, one of the coolest things for me, so I started in software. I'm one of the big numbers over here. I started in software before Google, right? And before search engines and before web. So the whole idea that now literally anything I want to know about, I can go find out. There's nothing stopping me. And yes, for the conspiracy theorists among us or whatever, that may not always be the perfect, reliable, excellent version of that thing. But the 98, 99% is great. The concept of wikis blew my mind. I've evangelized wikis into every company I go into. I think it's the coolest thing in the world. And the fact that Wikipedia exists, awesome. Perfect? No. But, dude, for whatever it is I'm wanting to find out about, I can get a taste just that fast. So if I'm reading a book, if you're reading a book, and you've got all these topics, and you're going, wow, yeah, underline that, underline this, underline this. Okay, what are you going to go follow up on? Yeah, man, there's only so much time in the world. But you can. And that's where the ignorance is my drug thing comes in, is I really like that exists, and I can go there. That's the fun of it. Any more? Gabriel? Yeah.
Sorry, so I'm coming back to the data that you collected.
Yeah.
And one of the questions was how many languages you've learned, and how many languages do you still know?
Yeah.
Say that, like those two questions, and the numbers are actually quite surprising. That most people who have a little bit more, like 6 and 7 and etc., they end up putting 2 or 3 on the actual thing. So that's the whole fact, like how much do you actually, from everything you know, how much do you still like supposed to know as well?
And I wondered, one of the reasons I wanted to gather this stuff for your sake, for all you guys, I mean, one of the reasons I try, and I think we try, data-driven kind of thing, in this particular Lead Devs Meetup, is trying to include some amount of data gathering in a lot of what we do. Because if nothing else, for me, when I was first becoming a team lead and then, kind of moving on in my career, one of the things I was always wondering about is, am I doing this right? Is anybody else doing this, and what do they do? So just having the panel where people talk about what they're doing, and you can go, oh, good, yeah, we do that too. Oh, yeah, they're doing okay, I guess we're doing the right stuff. This confirmation for you that people learn a lot of languages, and then they actually, later in their career, end up using just a few of them.
I think there's also a difference between knowing and understanding. So you could use 10 languages, but I put it in quite high number before, but I use only 2 because there are maybe 2 that I really understand to the small details. So there is a part where some problem, I will know the answer immediately because I'm just have the experience with it. So
that's something I got challenged at in the wording of the question, and I didn't have time to give you guys this piece of it. Explore the concept of fluency. And if you haven't heard of the Agile Fluency model, look at that and their explanation of the word fluency, because it actually comes from language learning. And how many of you guys have heard of where are your keys, W-A-Y-K? Where are your keys? Right now, where you're sitting.
I have another bookmark now.
Thank you. Where are your keys? Where are your keys right now?
Over there.
Okay, where are your keys right now? So this thing of going, when you look at anybody else and find out where their keys are, is there a methodology for finding keys? Can you think of, if you didn't know, if you left them and you lost them and you don't know where they are and you went back into your room and said, I have to go find my keys in my house, do you have a methodology for finding it? How to acquire fluency. The where are your keys thing is how they went about constructing methods to learn lost languages. Native Americans back home, all the lost languages. Same stuff. Fluency and the concept of using fluency connects to that same thing. So when you were saying, here's the thing where if I'm looking at the language and I know exactly what to do and I don't have to think twice about finding the solution to the problem, that's fluency. If you have to refresh your memory, ask people, that's not. So that's what I was looking for. How many languages did you learn to fluency? Like active coding every day for a couple of years. That's one number. And then how many are you using today? I was really pleased. There's a whole bunch of people in here up in the, I bet if we average this out, it's something around 10 years. Somebody would do a better job with that. So there's enough people in here that have been coding long enough to have a distinction between these two numbers. What I liked looking at it was, it's consistent across this. There's more higher numbers here, lower numbers there. You're going to age out the knowledge that you have. So plan for that now, that 5 years from now, you're going to be doing different shit than you are now, and you're going to have learned it. So if you build up in you a resilience about ignorance, about curiosity, that's going to carry you forward. You're going to be able to do more. Wow. Okay, cool.